And now for the block notes, right?
Yes, the after party after the show.
After the show. You said you feel like you asked too many questions.
Yeah, I was like, man, I'm feeling some kind of way after that episode because I'm like, dang, I feel like I really didn't know anything. And I thought I knew some stuff, and I feel like I got schooled, but like in a good way, though, like because I learned a lot.
Yeah, this is when they say it's a rabbit hole of rabbit holes. And again, why I always push, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist because I like the fundamentals, and I think it's well established and solid. But I push people to Bitcoin first because, as you'll hear many people who are into like DeFi and smart contracts and more complex operations, if you can't understand how Bitcoin works, and it just does base money, how do you wrap your brain around like an AMM? Or just decentralized exchanges in general, right? And if you get stuck in that Bitcoin mindset, I've had a lot of conversations with Bitcoiners who like, I don't try to push, you got to use one thing over the other, but they're like, well, DeFi is dumb. I'm like, well, DeFi is not really dumb.
Yeah, no.
Now, I get you if you don't want to use like a system like Ethereum or Solana or something else. That's understandable. But like, DeFi is just decentralized finance.
Yeah.
And finance, again, is just those games you play with money.
Right.
And if you want to do anything and see society scale upwards, you need finance.
I absolutely agree.
And what good is Bitcoin if you can't do if I can't do something as simple as lending and borrowing, which is DeFi, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to understand the basics, but then you can't get caught in the basics because it's those complex. So having a lot of conversations or a lot of questions is good. Yeah. When you stop asking questions, it's because you've stopped learning, and I don't know of anybody, I can't think of anybody, and I know people who I consider mastermind, Einstein-level people in the space who don't understand everything. It's too massive and expansive. Yeah.
And ever-growing and changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's a couple other cool things you can do once you have those decentralized exchanges we didn't talk about. Maybe we talk on another episode in depth.
I know. I was actually looking at my notes here, the questions I want to ask. I feel like there was just so much. Well, first of all, okay, so I'm going to start this one so I don't forget because obviously I've forgotten the main episode. But so just to quickly clarify, so like the main difference between CEX and DEX is the AMM pools. Can I call it that? AMM pools? Can I call it that? Okay.
Like AMM, just remember what you're saying, right?
Automated market maker. So like instead of like JP Morgan coming in and like putting money into it and into some coin or token, it's this pool. Is that, do I have kind of?
The key word don't skip over is the automated part. Traditionally, I needed a market maker. I needed somebody who was going to come in with the asset that everybody wants to either buy or sell against and offer it in scale. So that could be you. You could be the market maker. When you go to an exchange, there's called...
so it doesn't have to be somebody with a lot of it. It just has to be like some.
It just really has to be some, right? If you use... Everybody... Well, they just changed Coinbase Pro because everybody used to have a Coinbase Pro account.
Yeah,
I haven't messed around with it. They merged it with something. But I think Gemini still has a Gemini Pro if you have a Gemini account. Kraken is just an exchange.
Okay.
It's gotten to be one of my favorite centralized exchanges, but it's more difficult to use than like a Coinbase. I'm sure they have the app interface now. I don't really use centralized exchanges at all anymore. So I'm pretty out of the loop.
Suave, or what? There was a word you used. Sophisticated.
I'm here for the revolution will not be centralized, and I practice what I preach.
Yeah, good. I'm working on practicing what we preach.
But that being said, if you go to even like a Binance.com and go to the actual trading platform piece for the traders, don't trade because most traders lose money. Don't trade like that. Just buy and dollar cost average. But if you look at it, you see that little order book I talked about with a bunch of quick moving numbers that are green and red.
Right.
Those are all the people just yelling, hey, I'm selling for this much, I'm buying for this much. And when you get that meat at the middle, that's the price. That's why the price fluctuates. That's the newest meat. A market maker is somebody who doesn't just go on there and you have spot trading, right?
Right.
Spot trading means I go there and I'm not going to say I'm looking to buy ETH at this price or sell ETH at this price. I'm like, here's $100, whatever the price is right now, give it to me.
Yeah, I don't care.
So that's spot. You're not a market maker. You're just whatever it is. But if you click the little tab that says limit, so you can do these limit orders, that's what a limit order is, right? Now you're becoming a market maker.
I was a market maker a couple times then.
Right, because you're going in and saying, look, I have this to sell. I'm selling this much ETH. And then you're just placing it on the order book. And now you're going to wait until you find a buyer who's willing to match that price. Right?
Yeah.
So now you're a maker. You pay less fees because you're a maker because you're providing liquidity now. Spot people don't pay higher fees because they're not helping the market.
Right.
They're just sort of using it, right?
I always wondered why it was less fees because it also seems more like advantageous.
Advantageous, yes.
Yeah, I'm like words. To use the limit orders versus just spot trading because you can set the price that you want to pay or sell.
Exactly, but you might be waiting weeks.
Yeah.
For somebody to match that, depending on how you're setting your order. If you don't have that time, you're going to go in and you're just do a spot. I need to do this now.
Yeah.
So that for an exchange is a problem because, again, I need high liquidity in order to make anybody want to show up. Because if nobody's there, why am I going to do anything? So when you saw IDEX struggle because of low liquidity, that's when the concept of an AMM came. It's like, how do we fix that? Well, what if you didn't have to wait for a market maker?
Yeah.
What if we could have an automated market maker instead of a actual market maker? Well, how would we do that? Well,
so did they kind of like come up with that?
I don't know who came up with the concept.
Sorry, tricky question.
You could find it. I want to say it might have been Uniswap. It might be Uniswap might be the first one to do an AMM.
Okay.
Which is why they had such a lead in the market. But I could very well be wrong on that. I remember when it was happening. I remember hearing the conversations. Like, I was trying to wrap my brain around. Like, what's an AMM? Like, I don't. But I can't remember who actually was developing it. But yeah, that changed the game because now you don't have to find somebody. That's like the main difference because it's not the main difference. It's what made the difference is not having to need somebody to provide a marketplace for buyers and sellers to meet. Coinbase is a mall. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Gemini, Binance, they're malls. You need the mall. What happens when the mall is like, I pack up, I'm going home, or locks their doors? Right? The makers, the merchants, and the takers, the buyers, they don't get any say in that. Right. The big difference with a decentralized exchange is you have a mall without the mall. Right? Yeah. But that process was really hard to do in a decentralized way until they had the AMM. When the AMM because you had places like IDEX who struggled because how do I get people here? Right. And there's so many different cryptos. If they focus just on one, if it was just like, look.
Well, wouldn't Uniswap and PancakeSwap, wouldn't they just be the new mall?
Well, no. Yes and no. No. They do the math different. Okay. How they route things, they do it a little bit different. Sometimes they don't do it different at all. They just slap a different name on it and add a token. Like, if you're familiar with SushiSwap, Uniswap came out, there was no token. You didn't have a Uni token. Okay. Right? They provided a decentralized exchange platform. Then you had Uniswap, the company, who provided a nice interface to interact with those smart contracts. But you don't have to go to the Uniswap website to use Uniswap. You don't have to go to the Pancake Swap website to use Pancake Swap or Sushi. If you know how to interact with smart contracts, you can build your own platform. You can just use a terminal interface. Okay. There's a lot of ways you can interact with the smart contracts. That's the decentralized part. The front end, that's the marketing part, right? Okay. So SushiSwap was like, all right, here's Uniswap. I'm going to literally clone Uniswap, create a token, and then relaunch Uniswap with the name SushiSwap.
So right. if Uniswap, like, were like the front face of it, or the app, I guess, if that were to go down, you could still still use it. Yeah, a
couple years ago, 2021-ish, because anybody can list a token on Uniswap. Anyone can list any token. If it's a decentralized exchange, it's permissionless. So I can create whatever garbage token I want to and call it whatever I want to. So I can make the worst garbage, nothing token in the world and call it Ethereum.
Yeah. Oh. What?
And then list it.
What?
It's permissionless.
This is a new level of mind blown.
Well, right. And so that becomes dangerous for people.
I would
because
say
you're saying Ethereum, and then you pick the wrong one.
Yeah.
And you got this crap ass token. You're thinking you got this sweet ass deal because it's only 20 cents.
Yeah.
You know, I'm about to take that arbitrage to a whole other level. You just got screwed. Right. So, but that's the danger if you just interact directly with it. So you might have a Uniswap. Now, Uniswap, they messed up. Most companies mess up because they name their companies and their decentralized platforms the same thing. And it causes confusion.
Yeah, it does.
Right? So, for the purpose of me explaining the rest of this, the company is Uniswap Labs, and I'll say that.
Okay.
The smart contract, the decentralized part, is Uniswap.
Okay, yeah. I
okay?
Like that.
So, Uniswap Labs, who developed Uniswap smart contracts, they launched the smart contracts. Uniswap is decentralized.
Okay.
Asterisks every time I say the word decentralized. Right. Uniswap Labs was like, now we need a way for people to easily interact with it because most people don't know how to interact with smart contracts. They're going to build a website.
Right.
And part of the service they provide is when you go and look for Ethereum, they know the real Ethereum. They know the smart contract address for the Ethereum token. If I go in and launch an Ethereum mock token, they can censor my token. So when you go to Uniswap Labs website to interact with Uniswap, you only see one Ethereum. But if you go to a fake Uniswap,
there's
or an alternate Uniswap interface or try to interact with it yourself, that fake Ethereum could pop up and you might buy it. And nobody's there to protect you because it's decentralized.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because I feel like a couple of times when I went to a CoinGecko or something to look up different coins, you will type in ETH, for example, and there'll be 3 or 4 or more.
Yeah, you got ETH to the max. You got
but it's all the same. It's all the same ticker, if you will.
Yeah, because again, if you have a real decentralized system, who's here to tell you this is your ticker? When you go to Wall Street, you want to get on NASDAQ, they're going to tell you this is your ticker. Yeah. You can ask for one and be like, nope, that's some irrelevant company, but they got it. It's theirs, right? So you need this complex one. You make up your own ticker here. And that's what, even that was confusing in the early days of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin was, if you went to Bittrex, it was called XBT. If you go to Coinbase, it was called BTC.
Yeah.
Right? And I think there was one more. I can't even remember what it was. I think there was one more. They were all Bitcoin. They weren't fake Bitcoins. They weren't knockoffs. They weren't hard forks. They were all Bitcoins. Just there was no universal rule for the ticker. Now everybody's come back to BTC for Bitcoin. But then you have Bitcoin Cash, which especially in its earlier days didn't, and even now, they don't like to use cash. And same thing with Bitcoin SV. They'll say, this is Bitcoin. This is Bitcoin. You're having a conversation about Bitcoin. Yeah. They're like, yeah, Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin. But they're talking about SV or something. Yeah. And it's like, what do you mean you can do all this? You can't do that with Bitcoin. It's like, yes, you can. You're talking about core, which you know, you get into these little side conversations. But it's the ticker is how you know, because they're BSV or BCH. BTC is, you know, the one everybody, the markets determine as the actual original Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So those are the dangers of like a decentralized exchange, and that's the difference. It's permissionless. Anybody can do these things. The AMM, the automated market makers, changed how the economics work, right? So you didn't need. It changed how liquidity works, and it made it way easier to do liquidity, and then allowed you to do other things like we talked about, like yield farming and stuff, where you can take your receipts and go do something else.
Yeah. So then that actually is the perfect segue into what one of the questions I wanted to ask was, I have written down what is a liquid provider, but also how does someone become a liquid provider? Like
liquidity provider?
Liquidity provider.
You literally can go, I'll just keep using Uniswap because I know I'm most confident you won't get rug pulled going there from this podcast. But you go to Uniswap and you'll see where it can say, it'll say something like provide liquidity or whatever. You click it, you connect your wallet, and what it's going to ask you have to provide two sides of the trade, or you can do a single side, which means all you got is ETH. And what it'll do is if you got, let's say, 2 extra ETH in your wallet, right? Okay. We'll assume people aren't these huge whales and have like 100 ETH sitting around. Yeah. If you got 2 extra ETH or a half a ETH sitting around, right? That's $1,000-ish. You got a half a ETH. You're holding. You're not going to utilize it. You want to earn extra yield on top of your long-term belief in it. You're going to take that half ETH, you're going to go to Uniswap, and you're going to say, look, I want to be a liquidity provider. And they're like, cool. Which pool do you want to do? ETH, USDC, ETH, USDT, ETH wrapped Bitcoin, ETH wrapped ETH.
And they each have their own...
They all have their own pools.
And they all have their own, like, reward as well?
Yep.
Probably, yeah. Okay.
Well, no, like again, don't call it reward.
Okay,
they all have their own fee structure, but the fee structure is pretty universal. Fee structure. Okay. So it's like 0.2% or 2% fee or whatever the fee structure is. They all have their own fee structure. So maybe if you have 2 tokens, you might have a half of ETH, about $1,000 of ETH, and maybe you have $1,000 of USDT Tether.
Okay.
All right. So you could go to that ETH Tether pool and say, here's $1,000 of ETH, here's $1,000 of USDT. You deposit it into the pool. They'll add that, just like if you go with 2 cups, and they'll take those 2 cups, they'll take the ETH cup and pour it in the huge pool of ETH they already have. Okay. And they'll take the Tether and pour it in the huge pool of Tether they already have. And it just gets mixed in with the rest of it, and they give you a receipt. There's how much ETH, there's how much Tether. And then as exchanges happen, again, assuming the price doesn't move, right? Half of ETH equals $1,000. When you come back, maybe because of the way the pool operated, and if prices don't shift, you'll walk away with $1,000 of Tether and your half ETH plus your fee. But if the prices shift, if the price of ETH goes down, they have to, I get this backwards. This is I can tone back on the breakfast bourbons. If the price of ETH goes down, then they'll have to sell some Tether to buy more ETH.
To match,
right?
To like balance the books,
because it has to be equal as in terms of dollars. Yeah. So Tether theoretically will always be worth $1 if it's truly a stable coin, right? Recent events have showed us that isn't true, but let's assume it's true. Yeah. $1 of Tether is always worth $1. So that will stay at 1,000. If the price of ETH tanks, you have to sell some Tether to buy more ETH to keep that $1,000 balance equal. Yeah. So when you come back and the price dumped, you might end up with more ETH than Tether. You put in $1,000 of Tether and a half of ETH, but the price of ETH dumped by half. Well, that means when you come back, you're going to have $500 of Tether and you're going to have 1 ETH because the ETH value has dropped, right? Yeah. So you get more ETH, but it's worth less.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the reverse is true as well. If the price of ETH pumps, you get less tether, but more less ETH, but more stablecoin.
Okay. I feel like we're going to be here forever, but
yeah. Well, these are all
questions.
entirely different episodes.
Yeah.
So let's do one more hot burning question.
Oh, just one? Okay. Well, okay, you get to pick which question you want to answer because I'm not sure if where it they fall. How do you give yourself a loan? Mm-hmm. And then the other question I have is, if you're providing liquidity, do you have to add both pairs? Like if you're doing like a ETH to USDT, do you have to provide equal amounts of both pairs?
Let's do that one. I sort of covered it.
Okay.
Let's do that one because the other question is we'll do a whole nother episode about crypto lending.
Okay.
And that will be on that.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down.
All right. So, yes, that's sort of what I was just saying, right? When you go to a pool, it only works if you have both sides that people want to trade against, right? So, initially, you had to provide both sides.
So, like, they have to be equal? Like, okay, you have, let's say, $500 worth of ETH, but now your 500 that you want to lend is turning into 1,000 because you have to lend 500 of the other side of the pair. So 500 of the tether and 500 of the ETH.
If you want to do that, or...
So if you had 500 total, then you would sell half of that to get the tether and then make it 500, 250,
right.
250.
Exactly.
Okay.
Traditionally, you had to... I have a half of ETH. That's all I got.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have anything else. So I can't provide double the amount.
Right.
Right? So I would first go to... Before I deposit all this in Uniswap, I would use Uniswap interface, or you can use anybody, but I would use Uniswap and say, here's 0.25 ETH, I need tether, and it'll do a swap for you. And now you'll have $500 of tether and 0.25 ETH, and you put that into the pool and get your receipt. Then at the end of the day, when you cash it all in, you would take that tether balance, go back to Uniswap, say, I want this all converted back to ETH, so you have all ETH again, if that's what you wanted. Now they're getting more complex, so they understood that extra step, so they'll just automate that step for you in the background. So if all you have is a half of ETH, you can just go in and say, here's my half of ETH, and it's like, well, we need the tether, if that's the pool you want to be in, we need the tether, and you're like, well, I ain't got it, and they're like, don't worry about it, hit submit, and it will convert half of the ETH you deposited into tether.
Oh, God bless.
And the other half, and dump it in the pool. You'll pay the little fee and call it a day.
Love it.
Right? So go play with it, if you want, if you're curious. I recommend using a layer 2 or an alt chain if you want to play around with it, because the fees are going to be so much cheaper. And if you're not serious about doing it, the liquidity is going to be worse. But
when you say that, what is? Can you give a couple examples of?
Like, you might want to go use Polygon or Arbitron or Optimism or Avalanche or Solana or...
Sounded like you were naming off Transformers for a second.
Optimus Prime. Yeah. You want to go Binance Smart Chain.
Okay.
Because the fees are cheaper. Now, when you get serious, you have to do some research.
Yeah.
Go check out our episode, do your own research. But you want to do some research to make sure you're using a safe environment, because we just outlined all the risks of using a decentralized exchange. But if you're just playing around, you don't want to play around with $12 or $50 fees just to learn how these interfaces work.
Right.
Only play with what you can afford to lose. And this is not financial advice. And if you lose it all, I'm telling you, I'm not a financial advisor. You shouldn't listen to me. I'm a schmuck.
Yep, me too.
So
we're schmucks squared.
Yep. That's it. So check y'all out in a couple weeks. Hit us up on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever the place is. Let us know what you want to learn about. All right.
All right. See ya.